But what I didn't know, and I don't know if you want to jump forward, but what I was completely unaware of is this concept of limerence.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And so during the master class, when we first touched on limerence, it was like my whole world changed, because I think what happens is, or at least I won't speak for everyone, but I think what can happen is you feel like this is some sort of special, isolated event. You're the only person that's ever felt this way or gone through this.
Yeah.
Sue and I had actually been to a family systems therapist for how long?
9 months.
Before we found your class.
Oh, crap.
People can work on their marriage and get through this. They don't have to divorce, right? In fact, that percentage actually do.
We took it very seriously, and this was kind of a final straw for us. You know, it's like, if we can, I'm going to give this one, for me personally, I'm going to give this one more chance. These podcasts, this class, we'll go down this route, and if this, you know, we'll see what happens. And it was life-changing for,
awesome.
No question,
for our marriage.
Well, thank you. Today we have Sue and Matt with us on our podcast, and I've asked them to be on because they participated in our masterclass, and Sue had let us know just how much the masterclass had helped them. And I wanted to, you know, one of the things that we've talked about on the podcast is that there's hope, that you can do this, that you can work through things. And I thought, you know what, let's try something different. Let's get a couple that did our masterclass and ask them what their experience was, how it helped them. Sue had shared her experience that it was very positive and very helpful. And I told my wife, Sue, that your testimonial was probably, you know, probably the best testimonial, probably my favorite testimonial. How long have you guys been a couple? How long have you guys been married?
We've been married for 20 years.
Okay.
And we're together 3 years prior to that. So
Okay.
23 years we've been together.
Okay. 23 years together. How did you guys meet each other?
We met in college.
Okay.
We both went to the University of Kansas, and that's where we met.
Okay, great. Yeah, KU?
Yes.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Do you guys remember your first impressions of each other?
Gosh, that's hard. I do remember the first time I saw him, I just knew, and we ended up walking home from class together one day, and that was pretty much it. I just knew. I mean, there was never a question. We've just been together ever since. So
That's awesome.
it's just, yeah. That's why this has all been kind of a difficult situation to go through, because it was not very unexpected.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
So it was just kind of an unexpected situation. Obviously, there was broken trust. I want to get into that. How long were you guys married before trust was broken?
Okay, so we were married a couple of years, and we had an infidelity situation arise a couple of years into our marriage. And, you know, at that point in time, we were young, you know, 23, 25 years old.
Okay.
From there. And, you know, we probably did not address that the way that we should have. And as a result, it put some walls up in our relationship, you know, but at the same time, we just chose to kind of move on. We just kind of chose to move past that. We didn't really address it as we should have. Fast forward 18 years and a very normal marriage, 2 kids. So we just kind of pushed that off as if it was maybe just we were young and maybe got married young, but, you know, we love each other, we want to be together, that was a big move on. So that's pretty much what we did.
Okay.
Had a great marriage after that. So, and again, 18 years later was a huge, so.
Sue, we're breaking up a little bit. Sorry to jump in. First, you know, I guess it's happened a couple different times. One of them, it happened early on in our marriage. We put walls up, and then kind of what happened after that?
After that, we just had I wouldn't know if I would say we put walls up. It was more like we decided that was maybe because we were too young, or maybe we just made some dumb mistakes, or he did. And we just decided we're going to put that behind us and move forward and start our lives again. And we ended up having 2 children, had a very normal and happy marriage.
Okay.
And so that's why it was such a shock this go around.
Okay, I see. Yeah, we're a normal, happy family. You know, everything's going great, and then so no wonder this was such a shock, because it's like So yeah, it's always a big deal. You know, I'm kind of wondering how that's kind of how things were before the affair was discovered.
Yes, prior to me discovering the affair, I was sensing something was off.
Okay.
Feeling like something wasn't right. But but I didn't think this was it. I just thought, he's not very happy. We need to work on something. Something isn't connecting right. I just felt like an empty hollowness that I hadn't felt before. And so I was trying to figure out what was causing that. And I eventually figured it out, but it did take some time. It was several months of me wondering what is going on here, not expecting it to be that, an infidelity issue. So when I did discover, it was a shock.
Okay, yeah, it was a shock. So how did you find out?
He is a dentist and needed to go and see a patient on a Sunday evening, which is fairly rare.
Okay.
And I just flat out thought, okay, I'm going to follow my gut and my suspicion, and I followed him, and he didn't go see a patient. So I discovered it. However, I had hopes I was wrong and that he was somewhere where he was, innocent. But I was detective and found all kinds of phone records and all kinds of things. And so the next morning I did confront him, and he just came out and said, he was with his assistant. So yeah.
Okay. Well, that's a hard way to find out.
Yeah, it was not fun.
Yeah.
It was a tough time.
Yeah, I can understand that. How long ago was that, Sue?
That was last October.
Okay, last October. Okay.
So it's been a little over a year.
Matt, for you, how would you describe your feelings during that time?
Well, to me, what happened is that, or what I originally blamed this whole thing on was not a lack of sexual compatibility, but that was sort of my impetus behind it. But what I didn't know, and I don't know if you want to jump forward, but what I was completely unaware of is this concept of limerence.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And so during the master class, when we first touched on limerence, it was like my whole world changed, because I think what happens is, or at least I won't speak for everyone, but I think what can happen is you feel like this is some sort of special, isolated event. You're the only person that's ever felt this way or gone through this.
Yeah.
And when I discovered, or when you guys told us about this concept of limerence, I spent the next 3-4 days just really looking that up everywhere I could. I couldn't believe how much that is what I went through.
Wow.
And so that was probably the first big turn for me personally, was this idea of limerence.
That's awesome. Matt, were you in limerence at the time?
Yes.
Okay.
For sure.
Okay.
I didn't know it. And actually, and one other thing I wanted to say is Sue and I had actually been to a family systems therapist for how long?
9 months.
Before we found your class.
Oh, crap.
And there was no limerence. It was a lot of,
oh, man.
Well, anyway, it doesn't matter. But we never got to that topic specifically.
I'm sorry. I really am sorry to hear that. Honestly, that breaks my heart. But I'm passionate about it because, my parents divorced when I was a kid. I was 4 when they divorced. And at that age, being that young, it's almost like you're a refugee. One of your parents leaves home. I didn't leave home. My mom and I and my brother and sister, we all stayed in the same house. I had another brother that went off to college. And, we all stayed in the same house. But just that young, your whole life transforms. And it's upside down. And so, honestly, just to hear you talk about that, because I'm just finding this out right now as our listeners are.
Right.
Really makes me happy, because that limerence is such a difficult thing to break, such a difficult beast. And, your response to that is really impressive, because most people's response to limerence is maybe to kind of intellectualize it in the sense of, I don't know, the whole experience, but you maybe almost intellectualize it like, I know what you're saying is true, but my heart tells me something different, Or they even just say, nah, it's not limerence, And they only kind of call it limerence after the fact. They don't really kind of look at it in the middle of it.
Yeah.
And I think it takes a great degree of humility to be able to do that.
Well, I think it also, because we spent all that time, and I knew there was something off, and I kept telling people there was something wrong with me, but when it was described in that, I think it was maybe the second session, and I mean, it hits you like a ton of bricks. I mean, you may want to deny it, that's a possibility, but I think going forward for other people that will listen to this, I think when you're the one who's done this and brought this into your marriage, I think this sense of limerence, and I think there's probably a fair amount of people that go through this, it's in one way you can feel a little shame about it, but in another way it's a little bit freeing, because I really think that a lot of people think I'm the only person going through this. Like, this is a very specific situation to me. And so the two things, the limerence, and also I believe you gave a statistic somewhere in the mid-70s percentage that people can work on their marriage and get through this. They don't have to divorce, right? That in fact, that percentage actually do get through it. And so those two things really helped me a lot personally.
That's good. Well, I'm glad to hear that. Matt, let me ask you this. If you could kind of go back and talk to yourself a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, what would you say to yourself back then? A year ago, year and a half ago?
Wow. Gosh, I don't know. I guess
I can answer that.
I don't know. I mean, there's a whole lot of things that I would go back and say to myself, but I think one of the things that I would like to know is that your situation is not unique. It's not special. You know what I mean? I think that sometimes you tend to put aside things that you take quote unquote for granted. But the idea that, successful relationships, and this is something else that I pulled out of the masterclass, successful relationships are of course built on sort of that, what everyone thinks of, that love feeling, but it's also being there for each other. It's also you raise children together. There's a lot of things that go into that. And to think that you're going to go do something else is, when you can step outside of it, when you get past it, seems actually kind of ridiculous. You feel really kind of like I don't know what a good word, but it's kind of stupid. And so if I could go back and give that information to myself, that's what I would probably do.
Okay. It'd almost be like, look at this realistically. Like, this can't be separate from the rest of your world.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay. Matt, when you discovered limerence and you realized this is what this was, what kind of emotions did you experience? Was there like a sinking feeling, like an oh crap, what am I doing?
Well, it wasn't one pure feeling, because yes, at first it was shameful, because you feel like you got conned into something almost, but not by someone else, but you did it to yourself. You let something that seems so superficial and silly to grab a hold of you. So that would be sort of the very first thing I felt. But then a name to what I was feeling, and that other people have gone through this. And so if you can understand that you're not the first person, obviously I know I'm not the first person to have an affair, but when you understand that you're not the first person to feel this way, that this is not some magical feeling, that this is a real thing that other people have gone through, then it becomes, then you don't get these ideas in your head anymore. Then it becomes much more clear how you need to react to them.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. So one of the first things that you guys learned, about was limerence. Matt, that had a profound impact on you, where you went back and researched it over the next several days. What happened next in your guys' relationship as you realized, man, I'm really in limerence?
Well, I got super nervous about it, because the way limerence is described is almost like an addiction to the person. And I think in one of your podcasts, there was even some mention to, if they even see that person's face, it can trigger that limerence to start up again. And so while I was very happy for him that he had a definition, on the other hand, it scared me, because this is like an addiction type thing.
Yeah.
And it's scary. So we spent, now before we learned of limerence, there was a lot of going back and forth of me suspecting something still going on and him convincing me that it wasn't, which all the while it actually was. And now that I can look back and intellectually look at limerence and the effects it has on people, I have a better understanding for why he kept going back and forth, but yet denying it to himself, that, and so I was able to understand where he was at and where he was coming from and that addiction, but yeah.
Sue, let me ask you this: when you guys started the master class, you guys had done 9 months of couples therapy with like a systems therapist.
Yes.
Were you guys separated during any of this time?
We were not during the first 8 to 9 months we were living together.
Okay.
And this is what, one of those limerence situations where I found out he had gone and to her office. Her office is right across the street, so from his office. So I had found out, and I had told him, if I find out one more time that you have seen her, that's it. You're going to have to move out. Well, it happened. So, and I found out, and so I had him move out, because at that point we'd been going through this for almost a year, and I had it was just back and forth. He couldn't decide. We were stalled out, and so I just had to finally do an ultimatum. This is it. I can't do this anymore. And actually, I was around the 4th of July. I was pretty much ready to go ahead and file. I was done, and we came across the podcast.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's actually changed everything. We're in a much, much better place.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
It's saved marriage. Yeah.
Kind of we're in a much better place. Where would you guys say we're at now versus, in the middle of all this stuff?
From the middle of this until now, I mean, much better.
Well, I don't want to skip around on you, but I would say, going back to the way the master class is structured, there's some brilliance in the simplicity of it, but the first what do you want to call it? Not episode. What do you call it? First session.
Yeah.
Talks about how do you talk to each other, the healing. And so what I would say is the three things were: how do you sit down? One, you've got to decide. Okay, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to actually talk about this, because what we were doing before then is just sort of arguing or discussing in like little 3-4 minute tiffs or discussions or whatever.
Getting reactive and crazy.
Or we might text each other or whatever. So one, okay, we're going to commit to this. We're going to sit down. We're going to do it sort of with no one around, and we're going to go to this class, quote unquote. So that would be one. Two, learning how to actually sit and discuss about it was critical, because I have things figured out all the time. I got it all figured out. And so, and I'll be happy to tell you all about it, right? And so that's kind of, and so I'm very quick to just negate what other people have to say. To sit there and listen without an agenda was big for me personally. And then the limerence thing was number 3. And then I would say number 4 would be, what did I tell you earlier?
The negative cycle.
Oh gosh.
Was that helpful for you guys?
Yeah, so that was probably the biggest one, because we were able to name the negative cycle. Wow. You go through I don't want to give away too much, but
go ahead, give away as much as you want.
So you go through that exercise where you actually name the physical cycle. Name the negative cycle. And when we were able to do that and almost look at it as I like to call it a third party, but as a process or something you're going through, as opposed to me yelling at you or you yelling at me, or, hey, I'm being nice, why are you being mean?
Yeah.
So when we were able to do that and recognize, okay, here we go, we're going back into it. We haven't had a negative cycle, I mean, literally about anything in a while.
Wow.
I'm not good with spatial, how long it's been, but that's been, those 4 things absolutely changed our marriage, no question.
That's awesome. That's really great to hear.
Yeah.
But to hear you talk about this, it's like we haven't had a negative cycle in quite some time. Helped us work through the limerence, the healing conversations. Because I remember on there I was very specific about, like, this is what you do, don't do. I try to be very tough. Don't use me to, like, start a fight.
Right. We took it very seriously, and this was kind of a final straw for us. It's like, if we can... I'm going to give this for me personally, I'm going to give this one more chance. These podcasts, this class, we'll go down this route, and if this, we'll see what happens. And it was life-changing.
That's awesome.
No question.
For our marriage.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Hey. This is great. I'm really happy to hear this. I'm really humbled to hear this. I really am. It just kind of, honestly, it brings tears of joy to my eyes.
Good.
It's kind of bittersweet, to be honest, because you don't, for me, I don't, I didn't get into this because I had a good childhood or, any of that. So it's kind of bittersweet. I enjoy what I do, but I kind of feel more compelled to help people. But I'm really happy to hear this.
Well, it's working.
With this was a final straw for us. We were going to probably divorce if we didn't, without running into the podcast or the masterclass. Who knows where we would be.
Right. And that's, it taught us a lot. And we had a lot of time to, it also taught me a lot about the whole attachment injury. That was a really big one for me because of what happened, in our first go around 18 years ago. And then several, just events that happened between then and now, and made me realize that part of, the question of why always kept coming up. Why did you do this? Why did this happen? And I could not get an answer to that, which really was holding me up. Well, his answer was always that, the sexual stuff wasn't as exciting for him as he needed and all these things. Well, part of that I learned, it was probably partially true because of all the attachment injuries that I endured earlier that I didn't deal with and that I just shoved, to the side. So we've had, one long conversation right after one of the master classes where I was able to unload a lot of those attachment injuries that he didn't even realize he had done.
Oh, wow.
And he sat and listened quietly like he was taught in the class. And it helped me. It was a big turning point.
Yeah, Sue,
really turning point for me.
Sue, tell me about that, because those attachment injuries are traumatic. And so this was a real big turning point.
It was, because, 18 years ago when this happened, I don't know. I absolutely did not deal with it. I wanted my marriage to work. This was the man that I was going to be with forever. And we'd only been married a couple of years. All my friends were getting married. Nobody was divorcing. That was crazy. I'm not doing that. And so I just shoved it to the side. Well, then, several things happened throughout the years where I just felt like he was wanting me to be somebody different. He was, I just didn't feel like, and I don't know if it was, the first affair or what, or did he marry the wrong person? Does he think he married the wrong person? I just had that underlying feeling all along. Well, that creates a wall where you can't be open and sexually intimate with somebody that you feel like wants you to be somebody else or wishes you were somebody different or wishes they'd married. And so I always had that through our whole marriage, and I just shove it aside and just put it away. Well, eventually that will come out,
Yeah.
And for him, it came out that he could sense that I wasn't open and free. And for me, it was, I can't be open and free because I don't think I'm who you want me to be. So we had that big injury.
That makes sense.
And
that makes sense. It's hard to be, I don't feel like I can be open and free because I don't feel like you like me in that way, or like all of me.
Yeah.
And I need you to be open and free with me. And so I could see how that was kind of maybe creating injuries for both you guys.
Yes. Yes.
So,
and now I can see his side of it, and he can see my side of it.
Wow.
So I think the both of us played a role in it, and I mean, obviously I didn't go out and have the affair. I'm not going to take ownership of that, but I can own the fact that I did not handle those injuries as they came.
Yeah.
I probably shut myself down a little bit and put a little bit of a wall up because I didn't have a good self-esteem sexually with him.
Sure. Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, that's really powerful. What about the bonding events? Was that helpful, being able to talk about?
Yes. At the time of the master class, I think it was the second to last session was all about sexually re-engaging.
Yeah.
That was premature for me.
Okay.
Only because we just weren't there yet. So that was tough to talk about because I still had my wall up.
Okay.
And actually, after that class, Matt asked me to please to start taking some of those bricks down, and I had to make a conscious effort to do that and not put them back up because I would take them down every once in a while, but I'd put them right back up.
Yeah.
So because limerence, it's a scary thing. So you take some bricks down, and then you might hear something or think something might be happening, and they go right back up.
Absolutely.
So after that class, I took those bricks down, and I haven't put them back up yet.
Wow.
And I know.
Wow.
And I think we've had some big bonding events lately.
Wow.
We've done a lot of lot of good stuff together lately.
Holy crap.
I know. If someone had told me this is where we would be today, I would have laughed. 6 months ago, I would have laughed.
Wow. Oh my God.
I would have said, nope, not happening.
Oh my God. Have you guys had any other counseling since? I know you did the 9 months. But...
Not since we started the podcast.
Wow.
Not since
The class.
or the class. I'm sorry.
Wow. Holy crap.
Yeah.
This is amazing.
It was very helpful, but two people have to be engaged in it. And that's if Matt wasn't committed to doing it, it wouldn't have worked. If I wasn't committed, it wouldn't have worked. So,
One of the things I would say is, so Sue found the podcast first, and then she told me about it. And at the time, we were separated.
Okay.
And so when you listen to the podcast, or at least when we listened to the podcast, we didn't listen to them together. And so, I think one of the things that's brilliant about the master class is I started to listen to the podcast, and you look it up, and I think, quite frankly, when you're in the beginning stages of healing, committing to, especially if you're someone who's out of town, which the majority of the people you deal with are, just based on geography, that's a big deal to go and physically go to where you're at.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good idea, but I think one of the brilliances of the master class is it sort of bridges you from the podcast to the, so you can sort of, what do you want to say? It's it's all in the master class. Podcasts kind of tend to be grab a little bit of this or a little bit of that or a little bit of this, but it really distills everything down into, sort of a system. And then from there, if you can stay committed to going forward, then I think being in the one-on-one situation is a great idea for sure. But I just think for a lot of people, one of you may not be committed enough to do that yet. And I think it can get you there.
Yeah. I want to circle back to this. After that master class, I was able to take my walls down. Matt, what's that like for you to have Sue take her walls down?
It's a gift, quite frankly. I mean, when you're the person who's brought this sort of injury to your marriage and to your partner, there's a lot of guilt, and so you feel badly about. I felt like I changed who Sue was, and I felt like it wasn't just between she and I. It was, she became not distrusting, but maybe a little bit of whoever, maybe one of our kids, or maybe one of our friends, or maybe whatever. And I felt like I did that to her by putting her through this. And so when she was able after the class to begin to take the walls down, it's just a softening of each of us.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so because of that, it feels like we're quote unquote back to our old selves, if you will. And so that was an amazing thing.
Wow. That's awesome. Yeah. Back to our old selves. Back to, I'm assuming happiness, but even maybe safety with each other, a sense of security with each other.
Huge. That's huge. Because I was able to tell him when I thought I was going to put some bricks back up. Whereas prior to the master class, if I were to start putting them back up, he'd just get angry.
Wow.
He'd get angry and frustrated and just annoyed. And now if I say I feel like I'm putting bricks up, something's not right. He stops.
Wow. And
talks to me and we just work through it. There's awesome. No more anger and all that reactivity and negative cycle.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really great. Let me ask you guys this. What else? Because I'm just over here I don't know what to say. I'm just impressed. Because Morgan was saying we need to do a master class, and honestly, she talked about it for a very long time, maybe a year, honestly, maybe even 3 years. And I was always like, no, because I want to do stuff that I really believe in, that I think is going to help people. And Morgan, she was convinced that what we do can help people. But if we just need to deliver it in a different format instead of one-on-one, one-to-many. And
you can reach so many more people.
Yeah. And she believed in this all along and really knew that it could do this. But honestly, I know people listening, who are going to end up listening to us later, just to know that this masterclass has helped you guys this way. I know it's possible for anybody. And, our first 24 podcast episodes, it was a radio show that we used to have. And we really put a lot into that, and so it's, the newer ones are kind of more like what I'm dealing with that week in counseling, or what I, maybe based on what people are saying. So I get a new idea or a new thought. And so, they're shorter, they're maybe not as meaty, but because they were so intense because I wanted to really put a lot into it.
Yeah, and it reaches so many people. I mean, I've told many, many people about the podcast. Some of my friends listen to it, and they're not even having this issue.
Oh,
but
wow.
They want to,
yeah,
but they just want to hear how did you get through that? Because it was intense. We had a rough 9 months of back and forth and ambiguity.
Absolutely.
So it was just, it was crazy. So, it's out there, and it's incredibly helpful. It's life changing.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing this with me. Because see, when we got your email, you're just like, this has helped us. We can finally communicate. I was just so happy to hear that. I told Morgan, I said that's one of the best testimonials or encouraging words I've ever heard from anybody. That was probably one of the ones that was most special to me to hear that, just because it was so unexpected. It really exceeded my expectations. I'd hoped that. It's kind of you pray for it to be that awesome, but just to hear what you guys have done with it and how it's helped you, I'm really happy to hear that.
Yeah. Well, it exceeded mine too, because I was almost done.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it saved our marriage, and I'm thankful to you for it, because or we wouldn't be sitting here.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate that, Sue. Thank you. Let me ask you guys this. I know I don't want to take your guys' time, and I know you guys got things you need to be doing in a minute. I want to ask about just the separation and kind of, sometimes when people are in limerence, being willing to give an ultimatum is what they need. Obviously it has to be genuine and heartfelt. It can't just be like a tactic or manipulation. It has to really be something you can stand behind and you believe.
Yeah.
I've seen people do that, and it really seems to help limerence.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it maybe doesn't end the next day, but it does. People have to deal with, because limerence is probably one of the hardest things we deal with. People have to kind of just be able to go out and, like the prodigal son, they have to go out and, eat with the pigs and realize this is not what I want. Life does get better, and this is not where I need to be. And, and sometimes they don't have that chance until we're fed up with them and we're willing to give an ultimatum, but it has to be sincere. It can't just be, I heard this, Brad talk about it, I'm going to go try it. And so that sounds like that's what helped,
Yeah. If I had known it would, I mean, I was in a state of, I can't go through this one more time. Mm-hmm. Because there have been many instances where I'd caught him with her throughout the 9 months prior to him moving out. And I just told myself, and I told him, one more time, and I'm done. That's it. You need to leave. And I did find out, and I told him, you need to leave. And I mean, it was very difficult. I mean, we have 2 children, and it was extremely difficult to have to put them through that. But in my mind, the only way to save my marriage was to do that.
Yeah.
Because he was going to continue doing this as long as he got to live in our house with our kids and our family. And didn't seem to be anything that was going to stop it. Mm-hmm. So if I was going to save my marriage, that was the only way.
Yeah.
And it was difficult, and it hurt a lot of people. And I think that it was eye-opening for Matt to see how many people it then affected.
Yeah.
But, that's when I found the podcast, and that's when I kind of said, okay, well, we're going to separate, and now this is it. Yeah. If this was kind of our final straw, and then when Morgan had talked about the masterclass on one of the episodes, mm-hmm. I called Matt immediately and said, "Would you do that class?" And he said, "Absolutely, I will do that class." And so that was it. We did it, and here we are.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's great. I'm really glad to hear that. Really glad to hear that. What would you say to somebody who's like, on the fence about taking the master class.
Do it.
Yeah, there's no option. Just do it.
It's just, to me, it should save my marriage. You can't put a price tag on that.
Yeah.
It's like a no-brainer for me. It's just, plus, it forces you to sit down for 2 or 3 hours, in an evening once a week and dedicate that time to your marriage, and it's priceless. I mean, that time of education and healing and working, and it's just, you won't do that in your life if you don't take the time to take the class and sit down and dedicate that time. It won't fit in.
Yeah.
And so it was life-changing.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I would say a couple things. I would say one, you owe it to yourself. I'm going to speak as the, the offending party, offender, if you will. I would say you owe it to yourself to complete the entire master class before you make any giant life decisions, divorce or whatever. And here's why. There's no bigger driver in the world than me. There's nobody busier than us. I own multiple businesses. We are going all the time. So to think you don't have time is wrong.
Yeah.
To think that, you can tie yourself up in your business, which I tried to do, is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
You owe it to yourself to go through the class because you don't know what you don't know. I had never heard of limerence before the class. So something will click for you in the class that will put light into what you're going through, because I think you reference in the class multiple times and also in the podcast, but the offending party goes through a lot of emotional stuff too. Granted, it's brought on by your own actions, but that doesn't negate what you're feeling, and it just helps you sort all that out. And I really just strongly believe in this, as I believe in anything, that this is critically important for you to do. Wow. Because I listen to the podcasts, but until you can put it together, there are things in the master class that may be spoken about in the podcast, but it's not the whole enchilada, if you will.
Yeah.
And so you really need to sit down, consume the entire class, and then make decisions about your life post on that. I guarantee you will be happy you did.
That's awesome. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you guys sharing this with me and sharing it with our audience. We have we literally have a worldwide audience. Like, I think we're listened to in every country except for North Korea.
Wow. Maybe so. It's hard to get stats on that. Right?
Yeah, it's a closed country. Like, we're in a bunch of, I'll go in and look at our little thing. I know we haven't done an episode in a while, and but we'll go in and I used to look at it when we were doing it every week. It's just amazing. I'm helping people like you guys that I've never met and known, and it's just really neat to do that, because it's extremely fulfilling to know that you're contributing. Because I got into this because of my own pain. Like, my parents divorced. I was 4. My earliest painful memory was looking up at my sister, who was 10 years older than me, and she's telling me, like, Mom and Dad are divorcing. And I'm like, what is divorce?
Oh.
And,
what does that mean? And, it's just extremely sad. And as a kid, your whole world turns upside down. And Dad, he left the house, and I remember just, I just remember how much he loved us, because he moved across the street, and we lived in a small Oklahoma town, and there was like a motel. And he moved into like the motel across the street, across the highway from where we were at, and going to see him, and really made a big effort to see us. But at the same time, you talk about like anger towards my mom, because I didn't understand, and then she would talk about, well, if your dad didn't cheat on me, I wouldn't have divorced him, and like, so then you have anger towards Dad, and it's a mess. And
it is.
And there's some research that shows that pretty much no matter the situation, kids are always better off if their parents stick it out and work on it. There are limited situations where kids are better off if their parents do divorce, but it's, by and large, kids are better off if their parents stick it out, and I sure wish they did. And I had limerence. Dated a girl in college. Hope she's not listening to this. I had limerence. And met someone, looking to get engaged to her. And I had limerence. And I know it from firsthand experience, how powerful of a drug it is. I was looking for rings, and she was, putting the pressure on me, my first serious girlfriend. My dad would call me every day, be like, Brad, hope you haven't bought a ring yet. You're awful young, Yeah. And she would literally, call waiting was that was the big thing back then. She would call, I would be on call waiting with them, hold on, Dad, I'm getting a call. Hello, and talk to her. She's like, have you looked for a ring today yet? And,
jeez.
And no, and and it was during that time I met someone who, was always happy to see me, always had a big smile. Met her at I was part of Student Congress, and so it's embarrassing to talk about this, but met her around a campfire. I just remember just somebody who's happy. Just it wasn't really about her; it was how she made me feel, and just the limerence started. And I didn't necessarily go out and, it was a small college, and I didn't want to, in that relationship, to then go start a new one. But it really got me thinking, well, am I right? I'm thinking about marriage. Am I with the right person? And it really brought up a lot of questions for me. And it really brings up those kinds of questions, because most people who marry, just statistics show us that they have more of a companionship love. And so, I didn't have limerence with the girl I was dating. I had, a companionship relationship, and we got along great. But, it was kind of is this who I need to be with? Is this what the signs are telling me? Am I missing the boat? And, the stars lining up to tell me, who I need to be with. And I felt terrible. And that was honestly another thing, too, is I felt so bad about hurting her. I remember when I broke up with her, just crying, because I knew we weren't meant to be. I knew we weren't right. And, let me do some soul searching. I ended up breaking up with her. But that led me on a journey, I got to really become a self-improvement project. I don't want to do this to anybody else again. And,
Yeah.
So that's part of what led me into this,
Well, it's a wonderful program. Absolutely wonderful.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you, Matt. I appreciate you guys. Thank you for coming on and doing this, especially being generous with your time. I know you guys have family, and I want to thank you. And I know our listeners, this is probably going to be an extremely popular episode because we don't really have any couples like you guys on there. And so this will probably be one of the first ones that are up there. And so I want to thank you for coming on board. I know this will be extremely popular because limerence is such a tricky situation.
Yeah.
And, where you guys are at, it's honestly, it's working with couples where you guys are at, where I learned most of my stuff, because that's a hard spot. You don't learn much when you're working with a couple that's in a, that's kind of an average affair, but when they get limerence and they're, ambivalent, and that's really where you grow and you learn.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes. And without knowing what limerence is, you kind of feel like you're on a, I don't know what those wheel, the mouse wheel, what's that? A hamster wheel.
Yeah.
You just keep going around doing the same thing over and over again. When's enough, and you just don't know. But once you can define it and figure out what it is you're dealing with, it's easier.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you guys. Thank you very much.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Healing Broken Trust podcast. If you'd like free access to the first 20 minutes of the masterclass, go to healingbrokentrust.com. Click Get Access at the top of the page and create your free account today. As always, this podcast is for education and entertainment purposes only.